Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning for some of you in some of the time zones across the world. You are here for Cultivating Voices Live Poetry's New Books Showcase. It's not only our new book showcase for the month of January, it's our first new book showcase in our 2024 season, the first new book showcase of the new year. I was talking with the poets a little ahead of the reading and saying that we've had this one on the books for a while. And usually when that is true, oh boy, does my little heartbeat patter, 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 patter when I've had one on the books for a while because we've been in great anticipation. And today you'll be hearing from just four just smashing, compelling poets in Anton, Floyd, Catherine Ronan, Matthew Geden, and Francesca Bell. Just sit back, enjoy this evening, afternoon of poetry. I'm your host, Sandy Yannone, of course, for Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. I always like to remind folks that we are an international, intersectional, intergenerational reading series. We began in March of 2020, just in the first few weeks of the pandemic, to assure that poets had a platform to continue to share their poetry. And we have been so fortunate as we are approaching our 5th year anniversary in March to have hosted now hundreds and hundreds of poets from around the world. Again, today's lineup is no exception to the exceptional poetry that we are able to feature in our new book showcase. And so without further ado, I'm going to get us started. I'll remind you all, of course, that here in our Zoom poetry studio, the chat is live. Feel free to partake in robust and respectful conversation among each other. Share your love and appreciation for the poets and their poetry as they're reading. And of course, there are links to the books, the new books and poets' websites available for you to hopefully, if however your resources are available to you, to purchase one, two, three, four, thousands of copies of books today. Poetry is the gift of love internationally. So please do connect that way and support the poets and their poetry today. Well, our first poet today is Anton Floyd, and I have the great pleasure of, this is one of those amazing poets with whom I've actually met Anton. We did a walkabout all around Limerick one April, for April is Poetry Month. I believe it was in 2019. And of course,
That's right.
in 2019, we couldn't have known what we were headed for in terms of the pandemic. And really the joy of meeting Anton and walking around Limerick and reading poetry from different establishments that had posted them on their windows and their doors was, it was beyond charming, and it was beyond moving. And it's one of those poetry moments that I hold so dear in my memory because of the way that poetry is held in such high esteem in Ireland. And no better example of that than walking around to, the barber shop or the tobacco shop or wherever it was around the whole city of Limerick and reading aloud poem after poem. So it is just with a great fondness, joy, pleasure for me to be able to connect with Anton here on the program. And let me say welcome and a little bit about from your professional biography. Anton Floyd was born in Egypt, a Levantine mix of Irish, Maltese, English, and French Lebanese. He studied at Trinity College, Dublin, and University College, Cork, and he has worked in the Eastern Mediterranean and now lives in West Cork. Anton's poems are widely published and forthcoming in Ireland and elsewhere. He's an award-winning poet and several times prize winner of the international haiku competitions. His debut collection of poetry was Falling into Place from Revival Press, right there in Limerick, in 2018, and his most recent book is Depositions. 2 new collections are in preparation as well, On the Edge of Invisibility and Singed to Blue. Anton, thank you for, you're not only kicking off the New Book Showcase, you're our first reader in the New Book Showcase in the new year. It is a joy and a pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you this April also, hopefully in Limerick and Cork.
I remember fondly your reading when you were reading from Boats for Women. And I likewise had very fond memories of time. And I want to thank you and everyone at Cultivating Voices for this invitation. And hello, everyone. I want just to say a few opening remarks about the genesis of this book, Depositions, because for me, it was an unusual book and it came out of left field. My family history has been one series of displacements, multiple displacements from the Lebanon and Tyre when there was a pogrom against Christian Maronites in 1860. Family migrated forcibly to Palestine and Egypt and Cyprus. And after the Nakba in 1948, the family lost everything in Palestine, which is now sadly in the headlines. In Egypt, quite a wealthy established family. All the businesses were nationalized, coming up to and after the Suez crisis. Family went to Cyprus, where I grew up, and we arrived during the War of Independence, during which my 2 brothers were wounded, and we were then forcibly evicted at gunpoint by Turkish militiamen from a multicultural neighborhood. And my mother was a very brave woman. I have a photograph of her back here. We went back to get an area where there had seen quite a lot of traumatic fighting, and of which my mother was bayoneted in the neck. And so although we had these experiences, we have a deep, we went back to Cyprus, and in the wake of the 1974 Turkish invasion of the island, during which I'd lost a number of friends. And I worked there in the Eastern Mediterranean at the time of the civil war in the Lebanon, and the floods of refugees coming from the Lebanon, and all Egypt, where Christians were being persecuted by the Muslim Brotherhood. So while all this was going on, over the years it was percolating, and meeting a lot of refugees from the Lebanon and the 300,000 strong internally displaced people from Cyprus with their stories and our own stories. These things started to gestate, and the book Depositions came, in which I tried to channel my own experiences and what I saw and heard from people. I felt also that because it was a book dealing with displaced persons, and I wrote the poems with refugees and asylum seekers here in Ireland in refugee centres. About 20 years ago, we cared for 2 refugee boys who have since married, and we are honorary grandparents of 10 Congolese, Irish boys, and the book is dedicated to them, to and Andy, who suffered greatly as a result. They were young boys when they left the Democratic Republic of Congo. My son is married to an Eritrean, and my brother-in-law has 2 bullets in his back. He and his wife spent 4 HCR refugee camp in South Sudan, where they met. And consequently, I felt, because of the nature of the book, that I got money out of it. So all the proceeds from the sales of the book go to the UNHCR, the refugee funds of the UNHCR. And so far, we've raised about $4,500. And the book has now been translated into 21 languages. It's been an extraordinary, unpredictable and unforeseen journey for the. So I'll read now from the book, which is structured in a way that there are poems at the beginning. There are 120 tercets in the middle, haiku-like tercets in the middle. And then there's a section of longer poems at the end. And about 10 of the poems at the end came as a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And we have 20 families in our little village of Inchigila. So I had been reading Ilya Kaminsky's Deaf Republic, and so the epigraph for the entire book comes from a poem of his in that collection. And it goes, "At the trial of God, we will ask, why did you allow this? And the answer will be an echo, why did you allow this?" There are 2 troilets at the beginning. One's called Time's Plague, and it's inspired by a line from King Lear, Gloucester, a line of Gloucester's. "It's the time's plague when madmen lead the blind blithely towards the cliff and blames their one and only creed. It's the time's plague when madmen lead and clowns are licensed to proceed with truth set rudderless adrift. It's the time's plague when madmen lead the blind blithely towards the cliff." There's one crossfire. "The innocent all have voices. The sounds replay inside my head, their futures and all their choices. The innocent all have voices. Hope is gone when fear eclipses. The exile path fills all with dread. The innocent all have voices. The sounds replay inside my head." Some years ago, we were in Florence, went to see the Michelangelo's David, and there's also some of the unfinished, in inverted commas, statues of Michelangelo's slaves, which were used as a pediment for Pope Julian's mausoleum. And they were unfinished, they thought, but in fact, the bodies are trapped in marble. I saw these, and this poem came. Michelangelo's Slaves, Florence, and the epigraph is from Rainer Maria Rilke. "For here there is no place that does not see you. You must change your life." The archaic torso of Apollo. "I stand in awe before them, sense their fixed purpose is directed at me. Have they fallen for the trap of believing I have the knack of freeing them? This muscular aching demands relief, a frank response, a desperate act. I can only offer a poem. The one I am drafting in my head begins with the history of false starts. Thoughts buckle under the heaviness, this weight of obsessive memories. So many midnights of the unnamed. Every line is a strange sin, No deliverance yet. We stump, keep falling in a world of flaw, unviable births and stifled breaths. What poem can confront this enormity? Justice out the vanity of grief is the auroral shock across the dark. With some force of will, words like hammer blows must come rough-hewn. If any poem is equal to the act, it must come from the gut, with words to cleave the general ear, must speak the heaving struggle to escape the yoke, these marble shackles. Anna Akhmatova in St. Petersburg. Her son was sent to Siberia, and she was standing in a queue to try and get news, and recognized her and recognized her as a poet, and then asked her if she had the words to speak of their endurance and their suffering and their traumas. And she said that she would. And as a result, the poem Requiem came from it. And for the section on the tercets, I use an epigraph from the epilogue from Requiem. I knew this mantle for them, for their meager, overheard words. I will remember them always and everywhere. I will never forget them, no matter what comes. And if they gag my exhausted mouth, through which 100 million scream. The tercets are divided now into 7 sections, and I'll read a handful from each section. And the tercets, normally you would read them twice, but I'll just read them once for the sake of brevity. This story, forged on the anvil, this rasping file, the paths to empty granaries abandoned by ants. Fingertips caress the walls of home, reading Braille. No sirens wail, but wives keening the dead under piled debris. Black star. We move in lines. A satellite sees a panic of ants. Of the dirt under fingernails, paradise lost. No bridge can bear the weight of broken hearts. Exile is a forced road under a black star. It leads nowhere. The give and take of the sea. Sea air, the clothes carrying the fume of war. Lights melting into water, emigrant boats. A child face down in the shallows, a line in the sand. Shallow graves, deep sea, same indifference. 4, a hollow wasteland. Only voices unchecked by razor wire. Swallows transgressing borders, the welcome migrants. Asylum feels like a hollow wasteland between drawn lines. Nowhere else to go. I wither every day on your doorstep. 5, new omens. They scorched our land. The taste in our mouths, alien corn. My accent, the stranger never at home in this new language. In exile, the same stars, new omens. Summer's once, a glass blue sky without cracks. 6, map of home. The starry sky, the songs of exile find their way home. Parched, stories from the well, sweet on the mother tongue. The puppet, the strings that moves loop into nooses. Words don't come, the ceiling scars you can't see. Section 7, the dark times. This photo, that day we walked out past ourselves. Father's graveside, his unwritten life, a far country. Strokes of a pen draws scars on innocent backs. Mother tongue, each sound a contour, a map of home. Happy once, now we sing of the dark times. My grandmother is French Lebanese, and originally the family came from Peron. And in 1914, the Germans marched into Peron near the Somme in northern France, and they died the town and the surrounding area for about 4 years. And it was an Australian force that forced them to retreat. And as a young boy, I was very fond of my grandmother, and she used to tell me stories of her experiences and the family experiences. And this poem is called Peron, or Aleppo, or Mariupol, and now I think I would add Gaza. The poem is called Necessity Knows No Law. They were so absolute, defying the angles of the sun. They made our clocks tell their time only. They justified it, saying, necessity knows no law. They made a trophy of our flag, occupied our streets, daily parading their vainglory. They took hostages to gag all hope, summarily stole our all. They robbed our mattresses for wool. They froze us to the bone. Necessity knows no law. They left the town a ruin, every room, every stone defiled. Even in defeat, they could not resist a final arrogant jab, parading a slogan on our mayoral wall. Nicht angeren, do not be angry. Or wunderen, just be astonished. As you tell me this history, I search my heart and in your eyes to know finally what survives after necessity knows no law. Time for one or two more, Sandy? This is a poem. Also, my grandmother was a concert pianist, and this poem is very much channeling her. In the aftermath, when all came, the photographs record how the percussive blasts burst our living room windows, how shrapnel tore our lives apart, how those red-hot pieces of metal scorched the walls and made detritus of the objects of our home. One photograph was of the piano. It was Mother's upright, intact but disfigured, the varnish blistered, bits of mother of pearl missing floral inlay. What remained was discolored, the withered vestige of the paradise garden she nurtured, she to play. And turned, she tells me, we wept, burdened by grief, the hurt of memory and loss, the unspeakable weight of shock. Later, father says, after long silence, mother at the instrument began to play Bela Bartok's Standing Still. She played all, and every note was out of tune. I told her, he says, I will fix it, mother, note for note. But she shook her head. Don't, she said. We keep it as it is. And finally, a poem that was included in my other collection, but was very relevant, so I added it as an appendix at the end of the book. And it's my take on Walter Benjamin's Angel of History, which was his commentary on a painting by Paul Klee called the Angelus Novus. And I think it's very pertinent for what's going on in the world today. His angel of history, with wings outspread, turn to face the past and stare open-mouthed at a single catastrophe. His world lies wrecked. Before him all is ruin, though he looks fixedly. He sees memories fading, blown from view. That storm in paradise that raged in the past, he sees it raging still. The angel cannot stop it, wants to but cannot stay, wants to redeem our state from the mere mind and the leaden heart, wants to make whole what is dashed and lost. But his wings are caught in the maelstrom. It propels him backwards irresistibly out of time, leaving us to progress. Under the piling ash that grows skywards, minute by minute, we sift from the debris vestiges of hope. As we say, Osgelga Shinawil, that's it. And I send you love and thank you for your patience and your attention. And hello to Catherine and to Matthew, and lovely to meet you. Indeed. Thank you, everyone. This is the book, by the way, Depositions. Costs €15 plus postage, and all the money goes to UNHCR. And so far, we've raised $4,500, which is a small drop in the ocean, but nevertheless important.
Nevertheless, important indeed. That's Anton Floyd, everyone. Again, the book is Depositions. And, you know, that line, the innocent all have voices, you know, really compels me to think about how difficult it is for the innocent to be able to amplify their voices in all the noise of the other voices that seem to want to tamp those voices down. All the more reason why your poetry and the poetry of others around the world, including those poets that are still writing from Gaza and the Ukraine and in other areas of the world that are afflicted with the violences that unfortunately have not ceased to exist in our lifetimes. all the more reason why we must continue to work to amplify and help give voice to the innocent, create spaces for the innocent to raise their voices. And of course, whatever else we can do as poets, that's our work. I mean, you talked about Anna Akhmatova, and I'm reminded in the 90s, the early 90s, I had opportunity to go to St. Petersburg, and we were at the apartment that she would spend time in with Marina Tsvetaeva. You know the story, of course, Anton. And they would sit there and they would memorize each other's poems, and then they would burn them.
One time. Yeah.
They would burn them because they knew it was too risky to have them on paper. But that was how they continued the legacy of witness. And for their generation, and for the generation of, I fear the generation of poets now in Gaza and in the Ukraine, those poets that survive are going to be so significant. And all of us watching and doing what we can do will be so significant, so that those voices carry and tell their truth. Thank you. And everyone, please do, if you've the resources, the funds from this book today are going to the United Nations for refugee relief. I want to remind you, this is why we gather every week. Our very first reader, so compelling. We're here to compel you. And thank you so much again, Anton.
Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing you in April.
In April, yeah.
Yes. Well, we stay in that part of the world today where poetry is fresh and vital and, again, compelling. Right there in West Cork, so much is happening all the time. And our next poet is Catherine Ronan. Folks, you know Catherine Ronan because she's with us almost every single week here in Cultivating Voices, whether she's reading in one of our open mics or listening and supporting the poets that are reading in their new book showcases. So it is always, always, always such a wonderful day when I am able to introduce a person whose debut collection has come out. So today we get to celebrate with Catherine her debut collection, Elemental Skin, with our members and friends and poets here. And it's a real pleasure. Well, Catherine Ronan holds a degree in applied psychology and French. Writing poetry since childhood, she returned to the University of Cork and to study creative writing in 2019. Since then, she's joined multiple poetry collectives, performs on the open mics, and is a member of Doire's spoken word team, and created her first poetry film. That's definitely something I cannot say that I have done, called Policing Mary. She won the Winter Solstice Poetry Competition and co-curated Bandon as Poetry Town for Poetry Ireland. Her debut collection, Elemental Skin, was published by Revival Press, and there in Limerick in November of 2023. Congratulations, Catherine, and take it away as you always do.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. I'm wearing my Joseph Technicolor dream coat that's reserved for very, very special occasions. It's like being at the Oscars for me, sharing the stage with such illustrious poets. So I'll give you a little Oscar speech. So thank you, Sandy, Kim, and John, for inviting me to be part of the first new books showcase 2024. Thank you to Dominic Taylor and Audit Revival Press for believing in me. Thank you to the wonderful Stephanie Amaterstein for the cover art. And thank you to Adon Rilke Floyd for his photography. And thank you all for being here to listen to my poetry. So I'm going to start with the poem that won the Winter Solstice Poetry Competition. It's called Winter Hope. I knew you would come, invincible sun, rebirth from darkness, clocks burn and turn, stone singing ancestors face the same sky, mistletoe glows, fiery ankles feast. On the darkest day, Jupiter and Saturn kiss, fingers frosted blue trace ancient nights. You offer me the veiled chalice of begin. I crawl out of winter's cave, newborn in your sight, squinting at your song, written in the trees. I knew you would come, invincible sun. So the next two poems I'm going to read were published last year in Long Island Sounds Anthology, New York. And Long Island has a special place in my heart because I wrote to a woman called Anne Campbell, R.I.P. now, for 22 years, from the ages when I was 9 to the age of 31. So she was my pen pal for 22 years. So the first poem is called Black Eagle. We gallop as one over yesterday's land, nostrils flaring, riding tailwinds, grass and dirt rising, no blood today. Take me bareback into ancient ritual, unbridled mystic of the wild, crashing in roaring dark seas, crossing fast and furious white water. Straddle, black eagle, climb out of that ravenous place we once called ours. I hear you whisper, speaking to my saddened soul. I see you witch, gasping in all your purple glory. Tell me, what news of home? Sing to me of tomorrow. So this poem actually took about 3 years to write. But anyway, it's about how we can miss people and think about people, and hopefully they're thinking about us at the same time. It's called Across the Universe. I expect to see you around every corner, especially when it rains. But I know you footprint a different world now. We embraced here on cobbled paths, threading the same blanket dream, laughing at the moon lying on its back. I know your song rising from the river, stroking my legs on the corner of Patrick Street. You always did keep magnets in your pockets. Do you ever see me in clinking celebrations? Feel me dancing in the pale silver snake of your lazy cigarette brick. I see you everywhere, hear you everywhere, sleep with you in the eye of every storm. I miss you. But this next poem was published in Cork Words 2 anthology, and as I am a rebel girl from the rebel county, I'm going to read you a poem that centers around Cork. It's called Red and White Bones. Buttera, barraca, pana, home. Ham from O'Donovan's for me mam. Pick the plumpest chicken in the window, says me nan, with all the other headscarves. Coats with deep pockets, lee full of trolleys, Grand parade of first dates, I lick me lips. Love outside City Hall ignites 50 years. Vickerstown Inn turns my angel upside down. Bodega jazz sweats through white bricks. Songs rise from the marsh of ancient Cork. South Mall awash with merchant ships, laden with fruit for Cuthberts. Tripe, Dasheen, kidneys, liver, all smile in Irish Cote or English Market. Elizabeth Fort keeps secrets of women sent to roast in a different world for stealing ribbon. Charlie the Bog sings the boys of Fairhill. Murphy is still in a glass of his own. Donkey jackets play red and white bones. This is Cork, boy. Welcome to the moon. And I forgot to say that red and white, of course, are the colours of Cork. I should have said that before I said the poem. So this next poem was published in Woman Scream anthology. It's called Healer. Take this squinting kitten, stroke into full fur feline. Raise me from the shale grave of bedridden days. Take these shards, anoint with gold, vessel transformed, more beautiful than original sin. Take me in your swollen arms, show me the moon, silver pools of magic, I am sea. Take my face, whisper, rainbow after rain, create circles to complete new language. Healer, I am woman, heal me. So this is my second last poem, and it's written out of frustration, really, and determination. So it kind of explores the need to be resilient as a writer and to keep on going, and the importance to be determined. I think determination is probably 3/4 of the battle. I am Crow. I finger a glass full of eyes and throw them at the mirror of disbelief. Others stand in the shadows of all things silent and secret, like snuff. Tracks lay where they always did, sweating with error and wayward thought. Trapped throats find words tightly wrapped in bloodied bandages on footpaths. I pack that alligator case, and with every scale of thumbnailed life, I climb mountains of oily skin to become Crow. And then you see me at last. You like Crow? I like Crow myself. So the last poem I'm going to read is it was put to music by Mags Frieden O'Shea, and it came out of a course I did in UCC with Dr. Jenny Butler, Myth and Magic, and she was exploring the pagan goddess Bridget. That, of course, the pagan goddess was Christianized, but Bridget is a fascinating goddess / saint. So this is Bridget. Cupped flame of sunbeams and snow, cosmic power of renewal. Oak sap rises to kiss your fingers. Spring tides bathe your feet. You are sketched moon, fractured sun, first flower of spring in a druid's fist. Born between two thresholds, you hold hand of all labours. Or Mary of the Gale, we tie magic ribbons and rags to your holy wish trees, sing songs over ancient rivers, protector of poets, smiths, healers. We kneel before your mantle of stars. Bridget carried from Iona to Bethlehem. You inhale the dark, exhale the light. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, everyone, in full Technicolor, that is the uncorked Catherine Ronan. Catherine Ronan, uncorked. That's what we're going to call this set. I don't have to tell you, those of you who've been listening with us here on Cultivating Voices, live poetry, and listening is the definitive word here. Those of you listening to Catherine Ronan, her syntax and syllabics, they are like the rings of like triangles, like tapping a triangle. I mean, they are just, oh boy, did you roar today. Thank you. The book, the debut collection from Revival Press is Elemental Skin. There it is. There it is. That's Catherine Ronan again. Uncorked, my friends. Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. And congratulations. We're right there with you every step of the way. Well, this reading, as I said, was very compelling reading. Our first two readers, it's going to take us right up to the last word that Francesca has to share with us. It's just going to get better and better. And I am thrilled that we have Matthew Geden with us today to share Matthew's quite astonishing poetry. Catherine had her magical hand in helping curate this reading. And she said, "Oh, Matthew must read." And who am I to disagree with that? And of course, we have Matthew. Well, Matthew Geden was born and brought up in the English Midlands, moving to Kinsale, Ireland in 1990. And if you've not been to Kinsale, it's a beautiful seaside village in the south. He is a poet, a translator, and a creative writing teacher extraordinaire. Your teachings follow you, Matthew. I've been hearing about them. You truly are. There are no truer words there than that you are a consummate teacher. His most recent collection is The Cloud Architect from Doire Press, and he is currently translating the work of a poet I'm not familiar with, so I am likely to, please do help me pronounce the Cuban poet Yannone Colombi. And again, my apologies if I have mispronounced the name of that poet that, of course, now I will become familiar with. I will become educated about as a result of this reading today. It is a great pleasure to welcome you to the program, Matthew, and thank you so much.
Smoke. He watches lives burn to a nub end. The kids on the corner grow old in the early morning light. A fine mist suffocates the sky, reduces everything to black and white. The city lives and loves he might have lived are merely fictions now, unread novels on the shelf, far away in an unreachable universe. In real time, he stands in line, the humiliation of a handout that doesn't touch him, withdraws at once from his outstretched grasp. On the way out, he fixes the floor with a steady stare, as though following a trail of breadcrumbs that will take him home. And so the day slides past. Boredom fills his hours. The faithless clock ticks, monotonously counting down to zero. Open to the benign indifference of the world, he unpockets a bag of weed, rolls a large joint, packed and tamped down with tender care. As night falls through the floorboards, he lights up and lies back to think of the next day's plans, the nothing that will follow, the meaningless curls and clouds of smoke. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone involved with Cultivating Voices. I'm very honoured to be here. And thank you, Sandy, for the lovely introduction. The great thing about introductions is I always learn something about myself. And thank you also to Anton and Catherine and Francesca, wonderful poets all. I'm so happy to be here. What better way to spend a cold January night than to share poems and watch them fizzling in the darkness. This next poem is a poem about watching the sky turn from day to night. It was actually around midsummer many years ago, and we were camping on a beach in the west of Ireland, watching the stars come out as day slowly changed. It wasn't until midnight, I think, that it finally started to get really dark. And so this poem came out of that experience. Night Watch. That night, the disappearing Mayo light lingered long, fooled us into thinking we were younger, still setting out in the slow sunset of our youth. As the sky sank into firelight, we lay lazily beneath emerging stars, letting thoughts drift into cosmology and the comforts of space, watching a broad canvas of dreams unfurl. That was the night when your lips tasted of atomic dust, your yellow dress a shimmering sun, and the perception of motion moved us as we stilled. We shone easily then, light dispersing the shadows, unaware of the dark varnish that covers us all. So I've noticed reading through this collection at various readings and in other places, in other books too that I've written, that travel does seem to be a recurrent theme in both this collection and other poems I've written, whether it's actual travel or imagined travel or merely the journey of life that we're all on. And I'd like to read a poem now that is about an imagined Brazil. I haven't actually been to Brazil except in my imagination, and this poem is the result of that. It's very much derived from the writings of Elizabeth Bishop in particular. when I was looking through the collection earlier and I looked at this poem, it reminded me of a quote by Michael Longley, the Northern Irish poet, who, when asked where poems come from, replied, "If I knew that, I'd go there." And in many ways, this poem, Brazil, is the place I would go to if I thought that was where poems came from. Brazil. Aimless yellow clouds drift into the living room, punctuating conversation. Weather fronts push in from the kitchen, and I stare into the unblinking eye of a toucan. I live with strangeness, an uneasy pact with unfamiliarity, which curls like a blood-red snake through the trees. There are terrific thunderstorms in the static afternoons, and sometimes a witch-like woman comes to call, defining me with her huge blue eyes. At night, occasional candles burn on the beach, and the sea creeps in across the sand. Tomorrow, I'll go back to the Amazon. I don't know if I'll ever go home. So I don't usually do requests for the very simple reason that nobody ever asks me. But in this case, somebody did. So this next poem is for Catherine, because Catherine asked me to read this. There's a little bit of background to it. Ghosts, for some reason, drift in and out of my poems. I don't quite know why. I've never seen one that I know of, but I've written about them quite a lot. This particular ghost inhabited a library in an old house in the Midlands of England. I know it inhabited the library because there was a plaque there to commemorate the fact. The ghost was known as Hot Tom. Apparently, he was famous for his amorous escapades, shall we say. So anyway, I thought I'd write a poem for Hot Tom, whoever he is or was, presumably was, considering he's a ghost. Hot Tom. All history is here, in the corridors of the moat house, ghostly goings-on that take place when words collide, uttered into dust. Our circle narrows, drawn together in war and peace, listening to the sound of bombs falling like overweight petals dropping from a black rose. As we line up for photographs, a ray of light shines through me, caught up in the memory of what must have been. The little girl still seen occasionally on her way to neither here nor there. The cold, dark butterfly that rises from dust flies free into the November night. And in the library, Hot Tom stirs, restless in the bookcase. Leather-bound books surround him in stories, but he longs to return to reality, to bedding Tamworth wenches, living out the revolution with lust and gunpowder. Live life, he whispers, an incendiary flame in my heart. Thank you. I thought I'd better read a copy of the title. Better read the title poem, "The Cloud Architect," just to give you a sense of what the book is loosely centered around. And by the way, if you buy a copy of this book, The Cloud Architect, you get a free cloud with every copy. So the title poem came from a commission to write about the Elysian Tower, which is a huge tower in Cork. I say huge, that's by Irish standards. It's probably about 4 stories or something like that. But in Cork, it's massive and stands over the city. Was built during the economic boom in the early 2000s. But by the time it was finished, the boom had turned to bust and it lay empty for several years. It was seen as a kind of symbol of folly, of the Celtic tiger and all the ridiculous things that went with that. But I quite liked the emptiness of the tower. There was something rather attractive to me as a writer. And I imagined living there, living a contemplative existence on my own at the top of the tower. And I also imagined myself, for some reason, as a cloud architect. Now, it turned out a cloud architect wasn't at all what I thought it was. A cloud architect apparently is something to do with computers, but in my imagination, a cloud architect was something more interesting. The cloud architect. Instead of working, I draw pictures, mountain vistas or views from high windows overseeing the bottleneck below. I sketch a monk adorned in saffron robes. He contemplates the sunlight on St. Luke's, and the steel grey rain comes thundering in like a train. Moment to moment, the days pass. The pine door isn't aware of spring. The dormers weather the storm, and cumulus radiatus crosses from sky to sky, each one on the point of breakdown. When night falls, I slowly disappear. Clouds dissolve in the dark, and a small orange sun flickers, then fades away. Twilight consumes the tower that was there. All that is solid melts into air. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you all for listening. I thought I'd like to just finish with a final poem, listening to Anton talk about Gaza and Cyprus and various other places of conflict means that I couldn't leave without reading this poem, which is sadly relevant still, even though it was written about an Irish poet called Francis Ledwidge, who died in the First World War. He died at Ypres in Belgium in 1917. And at some point, I encountered some of his letters. And after reading a few of these letters, this poem kind of formed a letter from Francis Ledwidge. So I thought I'd like to read that, and thank you all so much for listening. A letter from Francis Ledwidge. I may be dead, but still I hear the roads calling, the hills of home, and the restless rivers wondering where I am. Mahmoud has found a simile for the moon. She hangs limply, broken like an old palm branch. Do come and visit. You may find me on the Western Front. I go out at night to watch the German rockets. They have white crests, throw flame across no man's land, burst into green and blue, drop down in purple rain. I gaze in awe, the last days of a beautiful world. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, everyone, I have told you time and time again today, compelling, compelling, compelling. That is the poetry of Matthew Geden. We today here on Cultivating Voices live poetry, we have been gifted with a master class on how to read your poetry. I need to unmute. Oh my gosh. Oh, my apologies. I was saying that we have been gifted with the most compelling poetry today on our first program of Cultivating Voices live poetry. And Matthew Geden's work, oh my gosh, added to what I believe today. We have been gifted with a master class in how to read and share poetry. And the lineation is just exquisite, absolutely exquisite. Matthew's latest collection is The Cloud Architect from Doire Press. And Matthew, I hope that we get to meet, that Kim and I get to meet you when we're over in April, and that we get to sit and have a very, very long conversation about Elizabeth Bishop. She's probably my favorite poet on the planet. And I would just love to just sit and read Elizabeth Bishop with you. That would just be amazing. So let's set a date in Kinsale or wherever. I will travel wherever. Everyone, again, that is Matthew Geden. And again, the book is The Cloud Architect. And don't forget to claim your clouds, everybody. Matthew offered every single one of you a cloud. Definitely take him up on that. Thank you again. What a reading. Well, our final reader for today, again, talk about compelling. I find the work of Francesca Bell incredible, and I can't thank her enough for joining us today. How could Francesca Bell not be a poet? That your name is poetry. Your name alone is poetry, Francesca. Oh, and your poetry is poetry. Folks, our final reader for today is Francesca Bell. Francesca Bell is the author of Bright Stain, a finalist for the Washington State Book Award and the Julie Sook Award, and What Small Sound. She translated Whoever Drowned Here by the German poet Max Sesner. She is translation editor at the Los Angeles Review and currently the Marin County Poet Laureate. Would you please join me in welcoming Francesca Bell?
Good afternoon, my time, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you to Catherine for including me. She asked me if I would do this. And thank you, Sandy, for having me. So I need to warn you all, I am in a hotel right on Sunset Boulevard. So you may hear in the background the sounds of LA happening around us. So because it's a Sunday, I thought I'd start with a couple of poems in which God makes an appearance. And this first one has an epigraph by Pope Francis. Right to life. It's like hiring a hitman. Pope Francis on abortion. I know what you are, little hitman, little cherub. Snuck up into me, swum past my body's barriers, implanting like a movie monster who takes a person hostage from the inside. You merely tap your unformed foot and my body bursts into symphony, blood volume cranked dizzyingly up, breasts swelling in fiery crescendo. Nausea slams me forward, just as your father liked me, a body bent double to take him. I'm on my knees, little one, surrendered, vomit heaving out of me like prayers. I know, oh, I know the life you've come for. As you can see, my religious poetry is maybe different from other people's. There are a lot of poems about motherhood in this book. This is What Small Sound. And here's one of them in which motherhood and God and my dog, my former dog, make an appearance. Oh, and I want to remember to tell you, an intention tremor is a tremor that happens as you begin to move. And a resting tremor is one that happens while you're sitting down that might be relieved by movement. Intention tremor. My dog's neurology is unraveling. He pushes his forehead to the precise place my tibia juts almost through the skin, where it feels like a shard, and rests there against that sharpness, as if wondering, what the fuck? His brand new tremor rendering everything unfamiliar except my shin, where he returns again and again. My life has skittered away from me too, like a ball of yarn, painstakingly shaped from the raw skein, now sent spinning across the world's slanting away surface. The dog whines, and I touch his head. He can't negotiate his water bowl anymore. The clear liquid in its usual container flummoxes him. Just as I can't navigate to a life of before and keep falling face flat against after. It's just after for the dog and me, as some higher power bats at us like a cat, claws unsheathed, defenseless in the presence of what creeps, unable to help but take part in an unwinding. As the dog cannot help but collapse after he trembles, and I cannot help but pray, bumping my skull against an edge that feels broken. As my girl cannot help but morph, like the dog, something growing or withering in his head, an illness spreading its dark wings in hers. Nothing we can see, no, but a presence, leering, indelible, like God. So I've always loved dogs since I was a little girl, and therefore I'm always the one who's bitten by dogs. And this is about my not sadly my most recent dog bite, but certainly my most frightening. Mistakes of one kind. The dog was sleek, brindled. He couldn't help people wanting to touch him. The silence of the beautiful is easy to misconstrue. I offered first my hand and then my face. What's very large is often hard to see. His menace was like that. What happens fast can only be experienced in retrospect. His bite was like that. I leaned into peril, sweetly, as if into a kiss. I was always like that. My face was sleek. It caused its usual commotion. The dog was brindled, big as a man. Once more, I was almost lucky. A surgeon can revise what a wound has written, amend the story a dog's teeth made, but I prefer to see my judgment lapsed, then risen on my face. That dog was a Great Dane, and he's about 180 pounds. He really was a hell of a dog. And so this is a poem I wrote for my mother. And it touches on the fact that you never know what your parents have really done for you. I think you discover it when you have children of your own, but you don't know it when you're still a child. And the title comes from one of my favorite poems by Robert Hayden, and it's called Those Winter Sundays. And Robert Hayden closes his poems with these lines. What did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? What did I know? By 14, I had lost all patience with her careful makeup, the fact that she ate cattle and swine and poultry, and said when asked that she would gladly kill anyone who tried to hurt me. She shaved her legs and had not read the diaries of Aeneas Nin, or Johnny Got His Gun, or the Ballad of the Lonely Masturbator. Failings I ticked off silently in the car beside her, those afternoons she drove me to the orthodontist she could not afford, so he could close the gaps in my mouth, coax my eye teeth from their Count Dracula positions, and give me finally the smile that would oil the hinges on so many of the world's doors. She cleaned up after construction workers to pay for it. Paint thinner, stripping her skin raw when she used it to clean spatters from the windows. For 2 years, my mouth ate up what might have gone for her to have new shoes or her own dentist. When her tooth abscessed, she waited it out, swollen and hunched in our kitchen, a woman pummeled by her love. So then the rest of the poems I'm going to read have all to do with aging, and in particular with aging as a woman. And this one also touches on the news. The news is something I really like to write about. Menopause, insomnia, news. I flare up and die back down, like the tip of God's cigarette glowing in the difficult dark after a day spent running the world into the ground. Aleppo, left out of the ceasefire, blazes, and Prince overdosed in his elevator, unable to rise above the sear of his pain. 3-year-old twins, untended, roasted their baby sister in the oven. And I turn in my bed, dripping like a pig on a spit, and think of my son, who fell into a ring of literal fire. In photographs, his palm smoldered, a handful of embers, while I wept, 1,013 miles away. And he called, alone in his dorm room, hopped up on morphine and afraid. When I was 10, I touched the stove's element to see if it was hot. My 2 fingers scorched as a good steak. The worst part of any burn is the cold, shivering while what remains chills, like ashes flicked onto snow. It's embarrassing, but I really did touch the burner to see if it was hot. That's probably sums up a lot of the mistakes I've made over the course of my life. Okay, just a minute. Deciduous. I want to be the tree when cold has come, after rain has run like lovers' fingers down my thick body, and my leaves have burst into burning. I want to glow like embers that are the fire dying, burning hotter and hotter until it's gone. I want my branching darkness exposed by the transparent insistence of wind as it pulls piece by piece my bright raiment off. I want to feel what's next curled inside me, tight as fists. I think we have quite a few women in the audience who might recognize this next phase, but for those of you who are uninitiated or perhaps male, I'll explain that perimenopause describes the delightful 10 years or so before the menopausal transition, when for many of us women, our lives sort of begin to unravel. It does have a little sweetness to it though. Perimenopause. Mornings now. I shave the dusky down mustache from my upper lip. My skin, unused to the razor's blade and glide, its scrape, breaks open in tiny bumps. The way I'm casually broken open all the time lately. My tears unchanneled, and at the smallest provocation, making glistening runnels down cheeks that sprout a new meadow of man fuzz. Like the boys of my youth, I gangle, awkward, trip over my own altered self, my loins alight with a strange new life. Last week, in the produce aisle, a man I've never been drawn to hugged me. His hands were warm the way a pilot light is warm, its staid flicker merely dependable in the dusty window of a hot water heater. But I danced to life like a kerosene slick touched by the sweet carelessness of a match, and stood there, helplessly burning. And I'm going to close with the last poem in this book. And I always like to say when I introduce this poem that many women and some men will recognize this sort of Facebook syndrome where if you're a woman, a man, you know, slides into your DMs, as the young people say, and starts to tell you all these things that you don't really want to know, and says, you know, you're beautiful, you're this, you're that. And so this poem was inspired by such a man. And what's funny to me is after the poem was published, I received a message apologizing, but it was from a different man, which just delights me to no end. Manifest image. The man keeps telling me I'm beautiful. I still look young. He says it like I've asked for it, but I don't care. For him or beauty. I am content to slip into old, wrinkled plainness, to walk on, unimpeded. I was young once, my body stunned. My breasts were really something, but I was something else entirely, something no one could see until now. Thank you.
Gosh, yes, 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 yes. Oh gosh, I love those poems so much. Woo! That's Francesca Bell, everyone. And I told you, compelling, 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 compelling. I keep repeating the word today, right from the start, right to the finish, right to the last word. Now. The last word was now. Here we are now, together with all this poetry. Francesca, we have a thing here at Cultivating Voices for Poet Laureates. I just want you to know that. And so do not be surprised if we knock back on your door and ask you to come on back and read in the future for many reasons. There are many reasons that we might, and we've heard many of them all in the brief 15 minutes, but one of them is our absolute devotion to those folks here in the States and other places in the world that serve their communities as poet laureates. So thank you so much. Oh, that reading lived up to everything I had anticipated. and way more. Well, folks, for our first reading today here in Cultivating Voices Live Poetry, our new book showcase, our first one of the new year here in 2024, were we ever gifted with an incredible reading? As I said, I truly believe a masterclass in poetry, right from the start to finish. We heard from Anton, Floyd, Catherine Ronan, Matthew Geden, and Francesca Bell. Before I make a few closing remarks, would you please unmute and show your deep appreciation for this just astounding, stellar poet?
Bravo, bravo. Thank you.
Incredible,
Founding.
astounding. You're absolutely right. My mom, because I'm a large S person, you can't always see that my mom is often sitting off to my left shoulder listening. And she said, astounding. It was astounding. Wise woman. Well, I hope you will join us next week, friends, for some more poetry wisdom when we return for our final reading of the month of January. It will be our wild card open mic, always our final reading of the month. And of course, looking slightly ahead to February, we're going to start off the month with a special event reading of poems from the anthology Black Joy. We're really looking forward to the array of poets that will be joining us. And our special new book showcase is actually going to be featuring Poets Laureates. It's our Laureate Love Fest new book showcase. So I hope that you will join us next week for your chance to be the featured poet. What we always like to say here on Cultivating Voices is anybody at any time who's in the audience often is a featured poet with us. It happens all the time. Everyone is truly a featured poet, whether you're on the Zoom screen or not for a particular reading. Again, I hope you'll be able to join us next week and make a commitment to February's offerings as well. Again, we're heading into our 5th year, our anniversary coming up in March, and we really, I don't know, Kim has put out the stops for these readings this year. Oh my gosh, when I'm looking ahead all the way up until June and beyond, I'm thinking week after week, if you can, be here. And if you can't, no problem, because all of our readings are recorded for posterity. You can watch them on Facebook and look at them on our YouTube channel. Again, I want to thank Anton and Catherine and Matthew and Francesca. I'm gobsmacked, as they say. I am gobsmacked from that reading. And I want to remind you all that if in case you have not had enough poetry, there's 6 times a year I do a double header of hosting. And so if you want to hear some more poetry tonight, in the States at 7:00 Eastern time, that'll be 4:00 in the West. You can come on back. You can hear Grace Cavalieri, Poet Laureate of Maryland. These are members of Cultivating Voices, of course. Ryler Dustin, who had a smashing reading with us a couple weeks ago. Barbara Crooker and Amy Holman on the West East Poets, Bicoastal Poets of the Pandemic. So feel free to go onto Facebook and look for that reading if you would like to just continue the party. Go from a quartet to an octet. Why not? Well, everyone, I hope that you have as peaceful a week as as possible. I hope that you take very good care of yourself, very exceptional care of your beloveds. And really, truly remember that poetry promotes peace and justice everywhere in the world in all languages. So keep writing those remarkable, necessary poems. I look forward to seeing you next week. This is Sandy Yannone for Cultivating Voices live poetry, with amazing thanks to Don Krieger, Kim Ports Parsons, and you, our beloved audience. Take care, poets.